first smart topic. We're talking about child abductions. Could you imagine your child being taken? The feeling of not knowing where they are or if you'll ever see them again. Well, unfortunately, this happens quite often. Did you know every year an estimated 800,000 children are reported missing in our country? That's more than 2,000 children every day, according to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. So, what's the solution? Well, we asked you on our Smart Family 15 Facebook page how you keep your kids safe and what to do if you are grabbed. Well, Candace Clark says she took karate for 5 years, from the age 5 until 13, and she says the benefit of learning how to defend yourself in these types of situations properly are essential. The key is not to panic and think which is the hardest part. Well, Sergio says start kicking and trying anything to get away because you don't know what they are going to do to you. The best advice he can give is to never walk by yourself and always have someone with you. And to you, team says, cause a scene, scream. When walking, walk against traffic. All of those are some great comments. So join in on the conversation. You can find us at facebook.com/smartfamily15. You know, we're reading your comments. Well, joining us now is someone who knows all too well the fear of being kidnapped, George Molho. He is a kidnapped survivor and the author of
Scarred.
A Memoir. It's a good book. Well, thanks for joining us, George. We appreciate you taking the time to share your story. Well, I have to say, I heard a little bit about your story, and you were kidnapped back in 1978. So tell us a little bit about this story.
Well, it was a year after my parents' divorce. My father proposed, came to me and proposed, let's take a long vacation. And of course, what kid wouldn't look at his dad and go, oh, I'm going to Disneyland for a month? Great. Well, eventually that turned into, he said, what do you think about 6 months, a year? I finally told my mother, and she talked to him. He said, it's the boy's imagination. He just wants to get us back together. Anyway.
Okay, so your parents were divorced.
So my parents were divorced. So after that, he picked me up from school one day, crying, doing the whole 9 yards, going, I want to go home. He's like, look, if we get to London and you still want to get back home, I'll send you back. So then it was Amsterdam, then it was France, and it was this. Eventually we get to Greece, and he says, now it's over. You're here, no more crying, no more fussing. This is the rule. So he ends up taking me to the mountains, high in the mountains in Greece near the Bulgarian border.
So your father kidnapped you?
Yeah, absolutely.
You had no idea? You thought you were just going on a vacation?
At first it was a vacation, but then I kept telling my mom, there's something here, there's something wrong. I think he's going to take me away. And she did everything she could to check it out. Okay. She went to the customs, she went to look at the passports, but he had put everything under a different name. This is 1978.
Right. No, we didn't have the internet.
and pre-9/11, so
right. So things were pretty, yeah.
So he took me to the mountains in Greece, and there for about a year he tortured me. Every time that I wouldn't denounce my mother and that I stated that I loved her, the beatings continued. Or every time that
So he beat you?
Absolutely.
And so how did he keep you captive for so long? I mean, you know, you were 7 years old at the time. 7 years old.
Well, it was in his village where his father...
Okay, so he's from Greece.
Yeah, his father had been a mayor of the town for over 20 years, and half the people there that I would go to for help, they were his cousins or relatives or distant relatives. So I'd go to them and they'd be telling him that he's trying to escape.
Now, had your dad ever been violent with you before in the past, prior to this? Okay, let me ask you a question just for the sake of time, because I could listen to the story all day. How did you get away?
How did I get away? My mother's family hired a group of detectives and one investigator who led it, which I now call Uncle Ted. He's a family friend. And he showed up one day in Athens when we left the village, and he saw me and he handed me a card. He said, I'm Uncle Ted. Are you George? Well, is your dad so-and-so? Yeah. He's like, go give him this card.
Wow.
24 hours later, I was on a flight for KLM bound for Houston.
Wow. And how long did your father keep you captive?
A year.
A year.
A year.
So how do you think that this experience, you know, very briefly, this is such a very heavy question, but how do you think it's affected your life, experiencing this? Because now, you know, you're a grown man and you're about to reach a pillar in your life.
I think the most profound effect that it had was that George, who was born on July the 8th, 1971, I'll never know who he'll be or what he'll do. I had to recreate and remake myself. And that person sitting here today, I mean, and so I like who I am now.
Well, that's good, that's good. And I'm sure you probably went through a lot, because that is such a violation. So I'm glad you were able to escape too.
Thank you.
Well, let me ask you some questions. So being through this, now you're an adult, and So what is the most important thing that you, because you've experienced this, that you would tell parents on how to keep their kids safe?
Well, number one, I would say, if I were to sum all the tips up, I would say you need to communicate. You cannot be afraid to talk to them and say, we're going to have this discussion. This is the real world. Mom and dad are here. They're going to take care of you, but there are going to be times when you're alone. And then I would say, if the child is old enough to be left home alone, you need to teach them some fairy tales, how to be able to talk to strangers when they call. You know, okay, my dad's in the shower, just got off the night shift from the police department. Let me get your name and number. And then you're going to have a friend of yours who they don't know call a few days later and check on them.
Okay.
The other thing, I would have them right after they learn their first words of mom and dad, and right before no.
Okay.
That you're going to teach them and drill into them your cell phone.
Okay.
Cell phone, cell phone, cell phone. And the last two I would say would be most important is kidnappers are cowards. So they approach children, they tell them, you know, mom is injured, dad's in the hospital. So you make an agreement with your child and you say, look, unless grandma or Aunt Josie comes up to you and says something's wrong with me, don't believe it. Run. Get to the nearest officer. Get to the nearest home. Bang on it.
Okay.
And last I would say is that every parent needs to give their children permission. Permission. If someone grabs you, fight, struggle, scrap, scrape, get in there. Because again, kidnappers are what? Kidnappers are cowards. They don't want to hassle.
And it's for their life. You never want them to get away with you because you don't know what's going to happen. So,
Absolutely.
And this is your Sacred, a memoir. This is basically your healing book.
Yes, it is.
And how you were able to move forward. So, George, thank you so much for coming on. And by the way, happy 40th. It's coming up in just a few days. So we appreciate that. And if you would like more information on the book and George, you can head to our website, abc15.com, and just click on the Lifestyle tab.